Hello, welcome to lesson 2.4, extensive and intensive properties. So we have some notes here on the screen. They are also posted on the Chemistry Mindset Google Classroom. This may be review, this may not be review. So extensive depends on how much stuff there is. For example, mass and volume. They add up when you combine parts of a system. For example, if you have two aluminum cubes differing in size, they will differ in mass. There's more, so let's say there's one 3 by 3 feet. That one's going to have a much greater mass than one that's like 1 by 1 inch. So intensive properties, they stay the same no matter how much stuff there is. Density is one of the best examples. The density of a small aluminum cube and the density of a large aluminum cube is going to stay the same. Color is another good one. The color of a substance will not change depending on how much of it there is. Let's go ahead and do some practice. So let's start off with color. I'm just going to write E or I for extensive or intensive property, and P and C for a physical and chemical property, because we're going to also practice that, because that goes hand in hand with extensive and intensive properties. So starting off with color, it is intensive. Like we said in our example, the color of a substance will not change depending on how much of it there is. But it is a physical property. It is not reacting with anything. It is not a color change. So combustibility is intensive. It does not depend on how much of something there is. It will still react. We haven't talked really much about combustibility. That will become more important in our chemical reactions unit. Hardness. Hardness is intensive. Again, hardness of the aluminum cube will not change depending on the size of the cube. It is a physical property. Has nothing to do with chemical reactions. So density is also intensive physical. So density was one of our examples for intensive. The density of the two aluminum cubes won't change depending on the size. And is physical, nothing to do with chemical reactions. So mass was our example for extensive. So the mass of those two aluminum cubes, best example, will change depending on how much of it there is. There's more matter in the larger cube. It is physical though, nothing to do with chemical reactions. Melting point is like when something is able to change from a solid into a liquid, like ice turning into liquid water, but there's no chemical changes happening when it melts. It's just a change of state. So it is physical. So ductility, you may or may not know what that is. Ductility is the measurement of the ability of a metal to be drawn out into a wire. So again, it is just changing the shape of the metal. So we know it's physical right off the bat. Ductility, it's intensive. It depends on the actual metal itself, not how it reacts with something. Volume was one of our extensive examples. Volume of a small bottle of water and a volume of a large bottle of water will differ greatly. Volume, however, is physical. Nothing reacting. However, reactivity with acid, it's right in the name. Reactivity with acid is chemical. However, it is intensive. A small amount of like a small amount of powder fizzing in water or something like that. Or let's say you drop a piece of meat into acid and it dissolves the meat. It will dissolve the meat regardless of how much there is. It may take longer, but it still will eventually. So it is intensive. Odor is intensive and it is physical. It is something we'd observe with one of our senses. Odor will not change. Like if you have a small cup of hot chocolate and a large cup of hot chocolate, it will smell the same. So weight goes hand in hand with mass. It is extensive and physical. If you have taken a previous science course, such as a physical science, you know the relationship between mass and weight. I'm not going to go into detail because that should be review. Malleability. So malleability is intensive and physical. Malleability, if you don't know, is the ability for a metal to be like how well a metal can be like hammered or bent out of shape. So it is just a physical change. Finally, we have tendency to corrode, which is intensive, and corrosion is chemical reactions. It's usually reacting with oxygen. But again, it won't differ on how much of each thing you have. So we're going to move on to this section here, where we've learned a lot of properties now from above. We're going to match them. So let's start off here with 15 dm cubed. So we haven't learned much about units yet. That will come in Unit 3. However, it is volume. I will just say that. We're not necessarily matching, we're more naming. I'll go ahead actually here and zoom in a little bit. Number B, or letter B, is malleability. We just talked about that. See if I can go ahead, spell that right. Okay. So 2.8 grams per, I believe that's centimeter. And since it is cubed, we know that since it's a mass over volume, G/cm3 cubed is indicating volume, by the way. G over cm3 is indicating density. We know density equals mass over volume, so those are the units of mass over the unit of volume. That is density. Letter D, burns when heated in the presence of oxygen. So this is combustibility. Again, we have not talked much about it, but here's your definition of it. So we'll dive a little deeper into combustibility in our chemical reactions unit. E, shiny metal forms a chalky white layer on its surface. That is corrosion, or the proper name would be tendency to corrode. Let's see if I can all fit it here. Not quite. Well, I'll just remove 2 and just write corrode here. These are all properties that are on the list above here, by the way. So I don't necessarily have them all up. I can't fit them all onto one screen, but there you go. So letter F can be scratched by diamond. That is hardness. That is, you likely explored that maybe even in middle school. Probably explored hardness, luster maybe. Ooh, fix that. there. So G, 500 degrees Celsius. If we think about it, that's a high temperature, so something's probably melting. That's probably our melting point. And now finally, letter H, we talked about the ability of a metal to be drawn into a wire. That's ductility. So that is all the practice I have. That is your lesson on extensive and intensive properties.